All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Wright, Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy for Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. This Uniform Land Use Review Procedure public hearing is being conducted from the Brooklyn Borough Hall courtroom. On the agenda are 5 applications today. Please note that this hearing is being recorded to comply with the open meetings law. The video will be posted on the Brooklyn Borough Presidents YouTube channel. Following the applicants' presentations and our question and answer session, members of the public who are in attendance tonight will have the opportunity to testify on the applications. All comments are limited to 2 minutes. Members of the public may also submit comments to askreynoso@brooklynbp.nyc.gov for consideration until Friday, July 19th. So please call the first item and let us begin.
Calendar item number 1, City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality Zoning Text Amendment, N230113ZRY. An application submitted by the New York City Department of City Planning requesting a zoning text amendment to implement changes to the city's zoning resolution to remove impediments to and expand opportunities for decarbonization projects within all zoning districts and across all 59 of the city's community districts. Community Boards 1, 10, and 14 voted to approve this application. Community Boards 9 and 15 voted to disapprove this application. Community Boards 2 and 8 held hearings on this application but did not record a vote. Please state your name and present this application.
Hello. My name is Emily Bachman. I am a senior borough planner at the Brooklyn Borough Office of the Department of City Planning. Happy to be here to talk about City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, a proposal to update the zoning resolution to help meet New York City's climate goals. Do I have control? Yeah, great. Okay, City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality is the first of 3 projects that the Department of City Planning is developing as part of the broader City of Yes initiative. The second economic opportunity proposal has started public engagement this month, and the third housing opportunity proposal will be next after that. Many of the elements of the carbon neutrality proposal are urgently needed, aimed at delivering zoning relief to home and building owners who are trying to undertake smart retrofit projects to cut energy costs and help the environment, but are prevented from doing so by zoning. And the City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, while it's part of the broader City of Yes initiatives, is a distinct and separate proposal. So I'm going to talk about just carbon neutrality tonight. And just to set the scene really quickly, why are we talking about carbon? We are facing a climate emergency, and it is largely driven by carbon dioxide emissions. We're committed to reducing emissions on the international, federal, state, and local levels, including the 2016 Paris Agreement, which seeks to limit overall global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And in New York City, we are reducing the city's emissions 80% by 2050, or 80 by 50 for short. In order to achieve a carbon neutral city, we need to first reduce our energy needs by retrofitting almost every building in the city to be more efficient. We need to clean the grid by switching from fossil fuels to renewables like solar and wind, and we need to electrify our remaining energy needs, including buildings and vehicles. As you see on the chart, buildings are responsible for the majority of our city's carbon emissions, so a lot of the proposals are focused on the building sector, but we'll also talk about proposals touching on transportation and waste. This proposal is responding to initiatives already underway at the city and state level. And the foundation for it is really Zone Green first. So a decade ago, Zone Green was a comprehensive overhaul of our zoning to allow for rooftop solar and other green building retrofits. And we're now revisiting those older rules, updating them in response to new science, technology, and regulations, including the focus on decarbonization coming from the Paris Agreement and 80 by 50, feedback from architects, engineers, and advocates over the last decade, and recent regulations. First, the Climate Mobilization Act at the city level, which includes Local Law 97, which will impose fines on large buildings that do not reduce their carbon emissions. And second, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act at the state level, which set ambitious solar and energy storage goals for the city. Development of this proposal began a little over a year ago when Mayor Adams announced his vision for City of Yes, and since then we've conducted extensive outreach with stakeholders across the city, held 4 public info sessions, and presented to community boards across the city. And along the way, we've engaged in conversations with partner agencies and local stakeholders. And tonight we're going to talk about the 4 key goals this proposal seeks to support, as well as 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to help achieve those goals. The first goal is to decarbonize our energy grid. Here, we're responding to initiatives already underway at the city and state level. First, on the state level, by 2040, New York State is legally required to achieve a 100% renewably based energy grid, which means developing large amounts of offshore wind, but also includes putting solar on our rooftops in the city and across the state. To utilize energy from offshore wind and rooftop solar, our energy grid will have to become smarter, decentralized, more resilient to fluctuations, with resources spread across the city. And to support the cleaner, decentralized grid, we need more local energy storage, essentially large batteries dispersed throughout the city. So what can zoning do to support a decarbonized energy grid? We have 5 proposals in this to achieve this goal. First, rooftop solar. In many districts, there are current limits on the amount of rooftop that can be covered by solar canopies. This proposal will update rules to ensure a roof can be completely covered by solar. Second, we need to do something similar with our city's 8,000 acres of open parking areas, ensuring that zoning is updated to always allow solar canopies over parking lots where they exist. Third, community solar, where one site is generating clean energy that's used throughout the neighborhood, is currently considered a commercial use in our zoning, which limits where it can be installed. This proposal will allow community solar to be installed in all districts, including, for example, residential campuses, hospitals, schools, and colleges located in residential districts. Fourth, energy storage. We need to ensure that safe FDNY and DOB reviewed energy storage facilities are located where they're needed most. Energy storage systems currently require a special permit to locate in a residence district. We're proposing that smaller installations, less than 10,000 square feet, would be allowed as of right, and larger installations would still require a special permit to locate in a residence district. Regardless of size, Department of Buildings and the fire department would continue to have review and need to sign off on any new energy storage systems before they're installed. And fifth, onshore wind turbines face really strict limits in today's zoning. This proposal would create a new tool that could be used for future applicants to submit onshore wind facilities for a public review process with the City Planning Commission. Our second goal is to decarbonize our city's 1 million existing buildings. Again, the biggest source of carbon dioxide emissions in the city. And in order to improve that, we'll need to retrofit virtually every single building to retire oil and gas-powered furnaces and boilers and replace them with new, highly efficient electric systems, and improve efficiency of exterior walls, windows, and roofs to keep heat and cool inside. It's important to note 2 laws adopted by the City Council in 2019 and 2021 that are crucial here and which we're responding to. For large buildings, which are defined as buildings 25,000 square feet and larger, Local Law 97 will begin to impose fines if they do not cut their carbon emissions. Fines will begin rolling out in 2024 and will increase through 2050. And second, Local Law 154 requires that all newly constructed buildings are electrified from the beginning. Fossil fuel-based equipment will no longer be allowed in new construction in New York City. So zoning can help achieve the goal of decarbonizing our buildings in 3 key ways. First, electrification retrofits. Zoning can provide more flexibility to accommodate the increasing need for outdoor equipment, such as heat pumps, which can't be located in basements or cellars, to be located above the zoning height limit on building rooftops. Second, exterior retrofits. Zoning needs to ensure that where someone's trying to add a thicker insulation or reclad the building, an existing building, by removing an old facade, replacing it with a new, more efficient one, that they don't run into zoning obstacles that prevent them from undertaking that type of project. And third, fixing zone green. Again, our zoning update from a decade ago, which had a wall thickness deduction, which awards a small amount of additional floor area for better than code buildings. We're proposing to update that to reflect the latest energy code and best practices for the future. And just a note about funding, we know that these kinds of projects are expensive. There are a lot of sources of federal, state, and city funding available, and the New York City Accelerator is a project of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice that helps connect property owners with technical and financial support to make these types of changes. Our third goal is to decarbonize our vehicles. There are currently 2 million privately owned vehicles registered in New York City, and less than 1% are zero emission. But by 2035, New York State has a policy that all new vehicles sold in the state will need to be zero emission, and so we need to prepare for that future. There are federal and state initiatives to help vehicle owners make the switch to electric, but at the local level, zoning regulates private parking and charging facilities and needs to be updated to facilitate a switch to electric vehicles. And finally, this proposal also aims to support alternate modes such as bicycle, scooter, and mass transit. So zoning can help decarbonize our vehicles with 5 key changes that we're proposing. First, by allowing commercial charging facilities in all commercial and manufacturing districts. They're currently prohibited in about half of the city's commercial districts. Second, allowing building owners to designate a portion of their existing parking spaces to be offered up as public EV charger sharing spaces. That is an extension of a rule that currently applies for car sharing vehicles in existing parking garages or lots, extended to public charging. Third, flexible parking, allowing for more flexible use of public parking lots, public parking garages, and commercial accessory parking facilities by allowing car rental, car sharing, commercial vehicle storage, and public EV charging within those facilities too. Next, automated parking, expanding special rules that only apply in Manhattan today that allow for indoor automated parking facilities to be an option citywide. And fifth, updating parking rules to acknowledge the need for public bicycle parking and allow bike parking facilities in commercial districts. Okay, our fourth and final goal is to decarbonize our stormwater and solid waste streams. We can reduce stormwater runoff by promoting greater permeability on site, which means less water flowing into energy-intensive treatment plants. And we can reduce the energy associated with hauling and processing garbage by reducing the amount of garbage. Up to 45% of our waste stream is organic material that shouldn't go to landfill and can be reused within the city. And we can reduce the carbon emissions associated with our food by promoting more local food production on our city's rooftops. So zoning can help decarbonize our waste streams in 4 key ways. The first, permeable pavers. We are seeking to clarify zoning's paving rules to ensure that permeable paving, which allows water to infiltrate into the soil right where it falls, is always allowed. Second, with street trees, updating our zoning street tree requirements to allow for new high-performance tree bed types like connected tree beds and rain gardens. With composting, the zoning resolution today does not reference or account for composting or recycling. So we're looking to add specific rules clarifying where those uses are allowed and to help those sectors grow. And rooftop greenhouses are allowed on top of non-residential buildings today, but to build one, current rules require you to obtain a certification from the chair of the City Planning Commission. By streamlining this requirement, we would allow DOB to review applications for building permits and cut costs and simplify the process for those looking to grow food on rooftops. That concludes our overview of the 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to help support the larger goal of decarbonizing our city. and as a citywide zoning text amendment, all 59 community boards concurrently reviewed this proposal with their borough boards and borough presidents. That's happening now. On July 26th, in 2 weeks, the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the proposed changes, and feedback can be submitted to the CPC up until their vote in mid-September, where the commission will vote on approving or modifying the proposal and will pass it on to the City Council. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Just a few quick questions. So the Borough President's Office remains concerned that there could be a loss in the street tree canopy by allowing bioswales or other new technology to be counted as street trees. Does the department have data or research to further explain why this wouldn't be the case?
Yeah, so to clarify our street tree proposal here, the current rules, which are remaining the same, are that developers need to provide a street tree for every 25 feet of frontage for a new development. What we're doing with the bioswale proposal is expanding the universe of options for alternate compliance when the Department of Parks and Recreation determines that a tree is not feasible. So right now, if DPR, Department of Parks and Recreation, determines that a tree is not feasible, developers have a few options for alternate compliance. They are planting a tree somewhere else within a buffer zone and within the community board, or paying into a fund for the city to plant a tree ourselves. What we're doing is adding 2 options to comply to increase the likelihood that green infrastructure changes will happen adjacent to the development site. So adding bioswales as an option, rain gardens, sorry, and also adding an above ground planter option. Specifically when the city says, actually, you can't dig a tree bed here because we have critical infrastructure too close to where the roots would be.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. For as of right energy storage in any residential zoning district, how can we ensure that there is no loss in community assets or that we're not unintentionally creating environmental justice issues?
Great question. When you say loss in community assets, I want to make sure I understand that question.
That like, if they're allowed as of right, that we're still making sure that anything that the neighborhood would still need would still be there, like clinic, daycare, like anything that helps the neighborhood continue to function, that we're not losing those in favor of energy storage, that there's like a way to consider having the storage as of right and also making sure the neighborhood has what it needs.
I will say I'm not sure that I have an example of energy storage system being built at grade instead of, say, a residential. That really hasn't been the focus of this proposal. The focus of this proposal has been on rooftop energy storage systems, so stacking that energy infrastructure above all of the beautiful mix of uses that we have in this city. And right now, that's allowed in commercial and manufacturing zones, but not in residential districts, except with a special permit in residential districts. So I think we can check on that kind of likelihood of.
Yeah, you can get back to
Yeah.
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 And then last question, is the department concerned that adding EV charging stations would incentivize surface parking,
Surface parking?
like as a use?
I will say we're also looking at ways to incentivize other forms of transit. One of the things we're looking at in zoning for housing opportunity is parking minimums, which are rules that require developers to include a minimum number of new parking spaces in developments or receive a special permit from the Department of City Planning to waive parking minimums. So those types of like mode change transportation sustainability questions we're looking at as part of other proposals. In this proposal, we really are thinking mostly about the shift in existing vehicles from internal combustion to EV, and how in a future state where we have a more sustainable transportation infrastructure in New York City, part of that will be personal motor vehicles, and the part of our city that's dedicated to personal motor vehicles right now is not currently set up to charge EVs, partly because zoning is not allowing it to. So I will acknowledge that we're not fully addressing the wide range of transportation issues that need to be addressed in New York City, but we are addressing the piece that takes place on the zoning lot and that we could feasibly do within this proposal.
All right, thank you. This
Thanks.
panel is now excused.
Great.
We will now call for testimony on this application from members of the public in attendance tonight. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on this item? Nope. Okay. Hearing no further comment, this item is now closed. So thank you both. Please call the next item.
Calendar item number 2, 703 Myrtle Avenue rezoning, C220453ZMK and N220454ZRK. An application submitted by Ranco Capital LLC pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter for an amendment of the zoning map, changing from an M11 district to an R7D district property bounded by a line 100 feet northerly of Myrtle Avenue, Walworth Street, Myrtle Avenue, and Spencer Street, and 2, establishing within the proposed R7D district a C24 district bounded by a line 100 feet northerly of Myrtle Avenue, Walworth Street, Myrtle Avenue, and Spencer Street. The applicant also proposed a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, MIH area, coterminous with the proposed rezoning area, mapping MIH options 1 and 2. The proposed actions would facilitate the development of an 8-story mixed-use building maintaining 54 units with an affordable housing set aside of approximately 18 permanently affordable housing units, pursuant to mandatory inclusionary housing option 2. Community Board 3 voted to approve the application with the condition that the building not exceed 95 feet. Please state your name and present this application.
Good evening, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. Thank you. I'm joined by Jake Levy, the project applicant, as well as Justin Sherman of JFA, the project architects, and Kevin Williams of GZA, environmental consultants. So we're here tonight to talk about the 703 Myrtle Avenue rezoning. This is a project summary. The applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment here to rezone roughly 8 lots or portions of lots in Bedford-Stuyvesant within Community Board 3 from an M11 district to an R7D C24 district. This here would facilitate the development of 703 Myrtle Avenue, which is a roughly 8,900 square foot lot with a new 8-story, roughly 48,000 square foot, 5.6 FAR mixed-use building. The building would have roughly 54 dwelling units and 18 permanently affordable units pursuant to the second item, which is an amendment of the mandatory inclusionary housing maps, specifically Appendix F, to allow for this area to be mapped within an MIH overlay. We're proposing to map option 2 within the area. So I'm going to proceed to talk about the land use actions, why we feel that they're appropriate. Justin will then discuss some of the particularities as far as the architectural design, and then the entire applicant team is happy to answer any questions. So the proposed development here was, as stated, produce an 8-story building of roughly 48,000 square feet. It would have a base height of 95 feet with 115 feet a total height. The parking spaces would be 11 vehicular and 28 bike parking spaces. There would be 54 units in the building, of which 18 would be affordable at option 2. The zoning map here, which admittedly is tough to read at this resolution, demonstrates the fact that there is prevalence of R7D-C24 in this area, specifically to the east of the area, and that was mapped primarily in the North Bedford-Stuyvesant rezoning in 2012, which rezoned roughly 140 blocks, but included those 5 block fronts about 2 blocks to the east as R7D-C24. So those block fronts were required to maintain inclusionary housing, but pursuant to an IHDA overlay, not an MIH overlay. The difference being that in 2016, mandatory inclusionary housing was created, and that produced a greater percentage of affordability. The 2 blocks to the east of this site, directly to the east, were rezoned in 2017 in the 723 to 733 Myrtle Avenue rezoning. That was done with another applicant, but by my office. And in that rezoning, this M11 district on the north side of Myrtle Avenue was rezoned to the same zoning district, R7D-C24. The primary difference between that and the North Sty rezoning being the imposition of mandatory inclusionary housing. So the rezoning here, as we'll see in the tax map and the area map to follow, merely extends that context 1 block to the west. You can see here in red is the development site, the applicant's site, which on this frontage is currently zoned M11. But you will see that the 2 blocks to the east were part of that 723 to 733 Myrtle Avenue rezoning. I think that the area map really well demonstrates why the R7D-C24 is particularly appropriate, other than the fact that there is a prevalence of the zoning on Myrtle Avenue. Myrtle Avenue here is a wide street at 75 feet. It's wide as per zoning, and as a practical matter is one of the wider streets in the area. It acts as a commercial thoroughfare in the area, and so the wider nature of the street gives it an ability to allow for more bulk massed on the street. So to the north of this block, you have Flushing Avenue, which at 70 feet is a narrow street as per zoning, where R7A was previously found appropriate, particularly in this community district within the Rose Castle rezoning. But here at 75 feet for the last several years, R7D-C24 has been deemed appropriate. There are excellent transportation options, both along along Myrtle as well as along Nostrand, and the subway is several blocks to the east. Importantly, the R7D-C24 has a somewhat unique characteristic in zoning in that when it is mapped, when the R7D is paired with the C24, it provides for a requirement that non-residential units populate the ground floor. So that in turn guarantees that this will maintain a commercial or community facility atmosphere on the ground floor. This has been something which is important not only for general planning purposes, but also for the community district, which here voted 33-9 in favor of the proposed rezoning. This is a zoning change map, which, as you can see, merely extends that zoning district 1 block to the west, the same R7D-C24 as previously approved. And with that, I would turn the presentation over to Justin, who can talk a little bit about the site design, after which I'll briefly discuss affordability.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Justin Sherman with J. Franco Architects for the applicant. So as you can see, the massing permits up to 8 stories. We have a commercial first floor and residential floors at 2 to 6. There's a setback with dormer, street front dormers at 7th floor and 8th floor. There's an overall site plan. The cellar is entirely parking. The ramp going up to Spencer Street entrance. Ground floor, there's a commercial retail as well as the residential lobby. And we have a partial mezzanine level for the residential use and access to the rear terrace and a essentially double height commercial retail space. The typical floor, which is 2nd through 6th, has a variety of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 bedrooms. Here on the 7th floor, you can see the partial setbacks of the street front, and the eighth floor as well. Here's the unit distribution chart. 54 total units. Majority are one-bedrooms with 18 or 33% two-bedrooms, 11% threes, and 5% fours. Here we have diagrammatic building sections to represent the height, capping at 95 feet, and elevator stair bulkheads rising above. And here we have some illustrated elevations, which we think are nice and will be a nice addition to the neighborhood in terms of the materiality as well as the bulk.
So in closing, I would just add two things. The first is that we, as a matter of course, include AMI information as well as rents. There was a discussion at the community board. We wanted to proceed on 80% AMI, which is option 2, particularly noting that the 2 blocks to the east of us are mapped at option 1, not both. And this was a restriction on the first rezoning, and so the option 2 here, in addition to allowing Jake to develop a feasible project, would also provide for a greater range than would be afforded merely from the 2 blocks to the east. So this does allow for us to kind of round out the potential range of incomes. The second thing to note, as was noted at the community board, is that one of the reasons that we really love this project is because the unit distribution here, if anything, favors larger units. So there's 25 one-bedrooms and a combination of 29 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units. As you're aware, pursuant to mandatory inclusionary housing, the affordable units in the building are offered at the same percentage as the market rate units and the number of units generally. So what this does is it allows some lower income and MIH applicants to garner larger unit sizes and larger bedroom counts, and we always feel that's a nice addition to a project. In fact, that was yet another thing that was discussed and appreciated at the community board. So, with that, we'd note again that the community board was favorably disposed towards the application, and the entire applicant team is happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. What efforts did the applicant make to market or redevelop the site under the existing M11 zoning district?
Oh, Jake, you want to get up? No, you have to come to the mic.
Hi, I'm Jake Levy, and I'm one of the owners of the site. Right now, we use the site for storage. It's a fairly large space. As far as to develop it as M1 would be very costly, and it would just bring another retail space. I don't think, well, at least I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was its ultimate use. We've been there, I'd say, for close to 40 years, and I've seen people exit at an alarming rate, and also people coming in. But mainly, I thought this project would be better than just having another Dwayne Reed.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, in discussions with city planning, the M11 here really produces what you have here, which is parking and storage. It is, as far as the utility of the zoning district, it is really limited, not only in not allowing for residential use, but in limiting the number of community facility uses. And so the opportunity really to bring transit-oriented development here, when you do have such close precedent, seemed to be just a great opportunity, which is, I think, one of the reasons the department strongly supported the project.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a proposed commercial tenant you're expecting to utilize the ground floor of the proposed development?
Yeah, I'll answer and maybe can supplement if necessary, but I don't think that there's been any specific tenant identified today, given the fact that we're in a rezoning, there's nothing assured. Having said that, Jake, having done business in the area for so many years, is very well connected with the local business community. The assumption would be that it would be some sort of local retail that would occupy the space.
And And can you talk a little bit more about the parking? How many spaces is it required per zoning? Is it residential, commercial?
Sure. Justin, you want to talk for a minute? I'll just start, but I know that there's 11 spaces. My understanding is that the 11 spaces are allotted for residential. And I know the Brooklyn Borough President's feelings with regards to parking just seem to be at this site appropriate for the development here. Again, it was presented to the community board, and they did appreciate the fact that there were just a modicum of number of parking spaces for residents.
Okay. But it's not required under
Oh, I'm sorry.
the
Do you want
R70?
to talk?
Yes. So we're required to have the 30% of the market rate units for the parking, which is 11, and we're
Okay.
proposing to waive the commercial spaces.
Wait, okay. Thank you. And then last question, does the applicant have an MIH administrator in mind to help with the marketing of the MIH units?
We don't. Our internal conversations to date have reflected, of course, we know that one would be selected from the HPD-approved list of administering agents, and our desire was to use a local nonprofit who has knowledge of the area, what residential marketing in the area is, what marketing is best suited for local residents, as well as an opportunity to engage in financial literacy training to ensure that the 50% of affordable units that are allocated to residents of Community Board 3 are actually applied for and successfully obtained.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The panel is now excused. We will now call for testimony on this application from members of the public. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on this item? Okay. Hearing no comments, this item is now closed. Please call the next item.
Calendar item number 3, Belmont Osborne rezoning, ULURP number C220438ZMK, and ULURP number N220439ZRK. An application submitted by Osborne Belmont Properties LLC pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter for an amendment of the zoning map. 1, eliminating from within an existing R6 district a C13 district. 2, changing from an R6 district to an R7A district. 3, changing from a C43 district to an R7A district. And 4, establishing within the proposed R7A district a C24 district. The applicant also proposed a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the proposed rezoning area, mapping MIH options 1 and 2. The proposed actions would facilitate the development of a mixed-use development of 2 predominantly residential buildings with commercial and community facility ground floors. Both buildings will be constructed in compliance with the quality housing bulk regulations. Building 1 will contain approximately 104 dwelling units and 16,983 square feet of retail uses. Between 37 to 39 required parking spaces will be provided below grade for the market rate units and up to 17 required parking spaces for commercial use. Building 2 will contain approximately 96 dwelling units and 17,218 zoning square feet are retail use. Between 34 and 36 required parking spaces will be provided below grade for the market rate units and up to 17 required parking spaces for commercial use. Community Board 16 voted to approve the application with no conditions. Please state your name and present this application.
Thank you so much. My name is Kimberly Headley. I'm representing the strategic planning team for Osborne Belmont Properties. The owner is Russell Fideli, supermarket owner in Brownsville, Brooklyn for over 47 years. The developer is Henry Hughes, Eric Eckstein of Eckstein Development. The architect is Charles Alwakil, Red Flux. The Land Use Council are Howard Goldman and Diane Liebs from Goldman Harris LLC. The environmental consultant is Kevin Williams from GZA. And I, as I stated, represent the strategic planning team along with DaCosta Headley. Present here is Diane Liebs, Kevin Williams, Howard Goldman, and Charles Alwakiel. The proposed properties are 2 buildings across the street from each other, both having 110 units each. In each building, 220 units total, 4.6 FAR for each building, 34,201 square feet retail space in total, and 100% affordable average AMI of 60%, and that's under discussion with HPD. Our local outreach to date has been to the Central Brooklyn EDC, whom we met with Ms. LaShawn Allen Mohammed, and she has seen the same presentation. She has offered her letter of support from the Central Brooklyn EDC, which was submitted to Community Board 16. We are part of the Pitkin Avenue bid, Brownsville Old Timers Association, several clergy, the police department. The owner, Mr. Fideli, has submitted to the Community Board, a letter stating that we would be working with the Central Brooklyn EDC to do the hiring and training for those who the EDC presents to us as a team. That's from construction to temporary jobs. And so we've been in constant conversation with the Central Brooklyn EDC. We have had several meetings regarding the ULURP process. We met with Board 16 back in February of 2022, the council member in April of 2022, initially with the Borough Presidents Office in July, and most recently this year, later on in May, we met with the City Council Land Use Division. And just on behalf of the owner, he really wants to express that after being in the community for 47 years, his gift to the community of Brownsville is to build this housing for those who live and work in Brownsville. And he wanted that stated on the record. I will now turn this part of the presentation over to Howard Goldman.
Howard Goldman, Land Use Council, Goldman Harris, LLC. The ULURP status, we were certified on April 24th. On June 27th, the Community Board voted 18 in favor, 9 opposed to the application. After the Borough Presidents period is over, we expect to be at the City Planning Commission in August and September, and then City Council in October and November. You did a pretty good job of reciting the proposed actions, so I don't think I need to go over them. This map shows the area to be rezoned. On the left, it's the existing zoning, and on the right, it's the proposed zoning. The major change is R6, which is a non-contextual district, to R7A, which is a contextual district. The FAR differential is currently, it's 2.43 residential. That will go up to 4.6 under the R7A. The community facility FAR will actually go down from 4.8 to 4.0, and the commercial FAR will stay even at 2 FAR. In terms of building height, under the existing zoning, there's no height limit. It's a sky exposure plane analysis. And under the proposed zoning, there's a building height limit of 95 feet, but the proposed buildings are 75 feet. The land use rationale, I won't spend a lot of time on it. This is the original 1961 zoning. It has not changed. The area is at the crossroads of major commercial and vehicular corridors. It's within a transit zone. The housing is important because there's lots of public housing in the area, which you'll see in a subsequent slide. But this is basically privately developed housing, which contributes to diversity of housing types. Economic investment, there has been disinvestment in the major commercial corridors and retail vacancies. This project will help to address that problem. And then in terms of the height, there are actually 2 7-story hotels on the same block, which were built as of right under the R6 zoning. So I'm going to turn it over now to Charles Al-Wakil, who's the project architect.
Hello, I'm Charles Al-Wakil. I run Red Flux Architecture, and we're the project architect here. So the site is located at the corner of Belmont and Osborne, and there's also a second site that is located in the mid-block of Osborne and runs through over to Watkins. Here you can see that highlighted. These are the adjacent New York City Housing Authority projects. Worth noting that when we were looking at this in terms of height and context and proposing our zoning districts, we were looking at the height of these buildings in the vicinity and kind of thinking that this is kind of a connector of sorts and something that's a little bit of higher density in between and that kind of matches the build form of what's in the other sites, but not quite, still remains contextual. So here are the sites highlighted with the rezoning area noted. Worth noting, the thing that informed our request for this commercial district was this Dollar Tree in particular. This was a custom build by Russell, our client, because Dollar Tree could not find 10,000 square feet in the adjacent community. Most of the retail around here is small. It's the sort of stuff that you see kind of towards the corner of Belmont and Osborne. Right now, the People's Choice Supermarket is also located there. There are short-term retail leases that were set up with the understanding that once this goes through, we would be demolishing and reconstructing, well, constructing our project. The Belmont Fish and Seafood Market, it's currently vacant, not being utilized at all. There is a parking lot there. This is a view on Osborne Street facing north. The project site, you can see both on the left and on the right. That small warehouse in yellow will also be demolished, and that would be likely the entrance to the building, to one of the buildings. And the other side is a portion of the corner of Belmont and Osborne. And now you're looking at Watkins Street, where there'll be a second building segment, also 7 stories. And you're looking at also the corner of Belmont and Osborne, where we would be demolishing those and constructing a larger building. A land use map, just showing the diversity of uses here. You guys seen this before. Our height study, just showing that this is well within the context of the existing urban fabric. A rendering of our proposed building, subject to change, of course, but this is what we're kind of envisioning. Again here, you can also see behind the 7-story hotels that were constructed on the Belmont Osborne block. These are higher than what we were proposing. And our initial massings were carved out early on. And here is our site plan. Here you see an L-shaped building on Osborne with a full story of commercial at the ground floor. Then on building 2, you see the same sort of 1-story ground cover and 2 building segments, both the same height, one that faces Watkins, one that faces Osborne. Osborne.
Great, thank you. Can you just update us on the efforts to pursue financing a 100% affordable project with HPD?
We met with the commissioner and the senior staff at HPD a few weeks ago, and we're working on it. We're working as hard as we can to come up with a package that includes low-income housing tax credits as well as affordable housing bonding. We don't have a commitment for it, but we are committed to make that happen.
Okay. And what program are you talking with them about financing it?
It's low-income housing tax credits.
Is it an ELA project? Does that sound familiar?
What project?
Ella?
No, no.
No, it's not? Okay,
And then there are bonds that are issued by the state.
okay. All right, thank you. Do you have any proposed commercial or retail tenants expecting to use the ground floors of both buildings?
We expect a supermarket to take the place of the People's Choice Supermarket, which is owned and operated by the applicant for this project. And the Dollar Tree variety store will be offered space in either of the two buildings.
Okay. Have you considered a parking waiver to fully or partially remove any of the parking from the proposed development?
Because we expect this to be 100% affordable, we don't anticipate the need to provide any parking, which, among other things, would just increase the cost of construction considerably.
Sure. And last question, do you have an MIH administrator in mind to help manage the marketing of the MIH units or the whole building if it is financed as affordable housing?
Not at this time. The developer, the Eckstein Group, has experience with affordable housing projects, and they're going to come forward with some administrative choices for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The panel is now excused. We'll now call for testimony on this application from members of the public. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on this item? Does not look like it. Thank you so much. This item is now closed. Please call the next item.
Calendar item number 4, 2761 Plum 2nd Street rezoning, ULURP number C2001001ZMK, an application submitted by Zaliv LLC pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter for an amendment of the zoning map, changing from a C3 district to an R32 district, and establishing within the proposed R32 district a C23 district. The application is expected to allow the applicant to continue to utilize this property with current uses. Community Board 15 voted to approve this application. Please state your name and present this application.
Good evening, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. Thank you. So we have here the 2761 Plum 2nd Street rezoning. This is a very straightforward rezoning. The applicant here is proposing a rezoning to rezone the project area from an existing C3 district to an R32 C23 district. And what this will do will facilitate the as-of-right operation of this existing long-standing Use Group 6 eating and drinking establishment at 2761 Plum 2nd Street. It is currently a TGI Fridays restaurant, a very well-known and beloved restaurant in the area. We don't intend to pursue any new development here. Really what the core of this application is about is eliminating the need of this applicant to go back to the Board of Standards and Appeals in order to continually renew the underlying term of a special permit granted by BSA. So in the existing C3 district, a special permit is required for operation of an eating and drinking establishment with a maximum term of 5 years. Since 1980, and specifically 1987, when the special permit was granted, the applicant has been back to BSA 5 times. Eventually, the applicant realized that a rezoning would be a better option here, and so with the acquiescence of City Planning and the Community Board, pursued an application for this rezoning. As stated there, the Community Board voted in favor by a vote of 33-1. This is a copy of the zoning district map. And you can see in the area the C3 along the waterfront, but you can also see that there are commercial overlay and residential districts which abound around the area. More specifically, this is the applicant site with a R32, C23 residential and commercial overlay. This would essentially legalize, or not legalize, but make the existing use of the property conforming and complying. So that's really all that's sought pursuant to the application. The additional lot area included in the rezoning would allow for a parking area for the site, which allows for roughly 97 spaces as was required pursuant to the BSA special permit. This is a land use map which really well demonstrates why this minimal rezoning is appropriate for the area. Again, the R32 district mirrors residential districts in the immediate area, particularly to the southwest, as well as R5 and R6 districts to the south-southwest. In addition, the commercial use here is appropriate. In fact, the C3 district itself permits commercial uses, just doesn't permit them at the same level of utility as would the commercial overlay here. This is a copy of the rezoning map. Again, this would alter the map by adding the R32 commercial with a commercial overlay, much as one appears to the immediately diagonal lots to the southwest. These are pictures of the site. Again, primarily occupied by TGI Fridays as well as a Cold Stone Creamery. It would be a threat to the surrounding area to remove one of their favorite ice cream and burger joints, so we're very cognizant of that. And then here are project plans. Again, no new development is sought pursuant to this application. This would merely allow the applicant to legalize the existing, or not legalize, again, make the existing use complying as well as make the parking complying. The elevations, again, in the existing and proposed remain the same. With that, we feel that we have a very straightforward rezoning. We're thrilled that Community Board 15 chose to almost unanimously approve the application, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Just one question. Can you please clarify the rationale for proposing the zoning map amendment rather than proposing a zoning text amendment to remove the BSA special permit requirement in C3 districts?
So it's a good question. The removal of the BSA special permit requirement would involve a citywide text amendment. The district is not a special district, and so essentially C3 districts, which appear throughout Brooklyn and beyond, would be affected by any text amendment. And while there may be a merit to doing that, the truth is that the environmental and ULURP review required to do such an action would be essentially citywide and would be fairly large in scope. So the applicant here, who has been a pretty good sport over the last 25 years or so, 35 years at BSA, essentially felt that a rezoning would be the most appropriate course for him.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Of course.
All good. We'll now call for public testimony on this application for members of the public. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on this item? Hearing no comments, this item is now closed. Thank you. Please call the next item.
Calendar item number 5, 180 Skimmerhorn Street Parking Lot Special Permit, ULURP number C2300447ZSK. A private application submitted by State Street Parking, LLC, pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter, for the grant of special permits pursuant to sections 7452 of the zoning resolution to allow an attended public parking lot with a maximum capacity of 245 spaces on property located at 180 Skimmerhorn Street in a C61 district within the special downtown Brooklyn district, Borough of Brooklyn Community District 2. Community Board 2 voted to disapprove the application. Please state your name and present this application.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Borelli. I am Senior Vice President for Edison Properties. Edison is an affiliate of the applicant. I'm joined by our land use attorney, James Power from Kramer Levin. I'll be presenting a lot of the context, and then Jim will get into the details of the specific actions. Okay, so the parking lot site is located at the corner of Hoyt and Skimmerhorn. Given its location and the characteristics of the neighborhood, it's not surprising that the customer base is largely local businesses, institutions, and residents. Edison has been operating a parking lot here for many, many years, but we only recently acquired it, or relatively recently acquired it, in 2015. The parking lot is within the downtown Brooklyn Central Business District at the edge of the Borum Hill neighborhood. Again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for the sake of a comprehensive presentation, I'm going to just go through all the neighborhood details. Interestingly, our site is part of a larger zoning lot that has been fully developed by the previous owner. So the zoning lot is the black dotted line. Our site, the parking lot, is the red, is shown with the red boundary. The zoning for the area, C61, provides for a mix of uses, but as I indicated before, the historical development of the zoning lot prevents other development, such as other development that's permitted by zoning, such as commercial use, community facilities, or housing. So in large part, that's why we're pursuing this application. The site is surrounded by recent developments of various scales, and it does remain the only undeveloped site in the immediate area. These are just some perspectives for context. Our decision to pursue this application was based in part on analysis of census data, parking data by local census tracts. You can see them highlighted here. You can see the census tracts here, where we sort of looked at car ownership and availability of off-street parking. Interestingly, between the years of 2011 and 2021, we've seen almost a 50% increase in households that have cars. That's circled in red there. At the same time, roughly over the same period, between 2013 and 2023, we've seen a decrease in the number of off-street parking spaces, a decrease of 76%. So that's, again, there are more households with cars and fewer off-street spaces available. 73% of our monthly customers come from Brooklyn. 63% are from the 2 zip codes that are immediately adjacent to the site. The Brooklyn Tabernacle is our largest user of our e-validation program, and we do have a number of customers who are local service providers who have offices in the area. Just to touch upon the traffic analysis that we did. Before COVID, we looked at our ins and outs for the existing parking lot before COVID to give you a sense of level of activity of cars coming and going from the facility. And the peak hour, the number of peak hour exits on a Saturday was 12, and it was 18 on weekdays. So that gives you a sense of how it operates now and what the peak hours look like. Between the no action and the with action scenarios, the highest number of incremental peak hour exits on a weekday is 15. We did not do an analysis of or weekend projections, but it's safe to assume that the non-peak hour exits on weekends are considerably lower. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jim, who's going to talk about the specific actions, and then I'll wrap it up with some final words.
Thank you, Anthony. Again, Jim Power from Kramer Levin. Here we have the proposed parking plan There would be 245 parking spaces, including lift spaces, 21 bicycle spaces along Hoyt Street there, and 12 reservoir spaces. Vehicles would enter via a 12-foot wide curb cut on Schermerhorn, which would be, that curb cut would be smaller and further west than the existing curb cut, and cars would exit via a 10-foot wide curb cut on Hoyt Street. There would be adequate circulation space within the facility for movement of vehicles and customers. There would be a 4-foot wide landscaped area around the perimeter of the parking area, along with a 6-foot high decorative fence. There would be a landscaped area at the corner of Hoyt and Schermerhorn Streets. The area would total 858 square feet. It would include 2 radial benches and adjacent seating areas. It would be planted with species from the city's recommended landscaping list, and it would incorporate a number of elements from the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership's Public Realm Plan. Here we have some more details on the landscaping. Again, we have 2 land use actions that we are requesting. A special permit under section 7452 to increase the parking capacity from the existing 114 spaces with an allowable capacity of 150 to 245 spaces, including parking lifts. And second, an authorization to modify perimeter landscaping requirements. Regarding the special permit, we show on our application that we meet the required findings. We comply with the curb cut, surfacing, and screening requirements. The parking lot serves the diverse uses in the area. The proposal would add parking capacity but would have no significant traffic or other adverse impacts. We would reduce and relocate the curb cut to reduce the potential for pedestrian conflicts. We have the required 12 reservoir spaces, and since the lot is served by a number of arterial streets, these streets should be adequate to handle any increase in traffic. Regarding the authorization, we are requesting a reduction in the perimeter landscaping area from the required 7 feet to 4 feet, and requesting to modify the requirements that the landscaped area be planted with trees and that the underdrain, curb inlet, and ground cover be provided, and modification of the obstruction requirements to permit a 6-foot high decorative fence. We show in our application that we have complied with the landscaping requirements to the maximum extent practicable. The lot is shallow and irregular, so that providing 7 feet of landscaping would severely restrict the location of parking spaces and the amount of circulation area. Other zoning regulations also limit the site, including rear yard, bicycle parking, reservoir space, and entrance exit location requirements. Further, it would not be practical to plant the 4-foot landscaped area with trees or provide the required underdrain, curb, inlet, or ground cover, and the proposed 6-foot height of the fence is necessary to provide adequate and safe separation of the sidewalk public area from the plant parking lift structures and the vehicles parking in them. Here we have a couple of slides showing sections through from the sidewalk and into the perimeter area and the seating area, and some further detail on the landscaping and the seating that would be provided. Anthony, did you want to take back over here?
So as part of our application to city planning, they asked us to prepare a conceptual rendering of what the facility would look like with the improvements. So this is what it looks like now. The perimeter is fenced with a chain link fence, and there are currently 19 too-high mechanical lifts. We're proposing to have 2 rows of 4-high mechanical lifts. You can see them here. You can also see the corner sitting area that we were asked to provide. It's more than 50% softscape. The rest, where it's paved, is it's not permeable pavement, but it is pavers that does allow water to percolate down. It's worth noting that these same stackers exist in 2 other locations on Schermerhorn. One location is at the corner of Smith, and the other is near Court. We did do a good amount of pre-certification outreach, and I've had a number of conversations with key community members about our application. This list here shows what we've heard from those pre-certification discussions and what we've heard more recently at the Community Board's public hearing. I'm only identifying this to show that we have had good conversation about issues, and we have tried to be responsive and transparent with what it is that we're doing. And that's our presentation, and happy to take any questions from you if you have any.
Thank you. Just one question. I know we've spoken about this, but is the applicant willing to undertake a community visioning process and refile the application with a project that meets other community needs?
I mean, yes. I'm always happy to talk with the community about our site and what we can do with our site. You know, anything beyond, like more than what you see now, would require a rezoning. As I mentioned in the presentation, the historical development of the site resulted in our parcel being left with 0 buildable FAR. So a rezoning would be required in order to build a building. We would love to build a building, and we would love to work with the Borough President and the community on determining what type of building would be appropriate at that location.
All right.
That said, we do have an application now for a parking lot. We are, you know, as I mentioned before, we are interested in improving the site. What we're proposing now, in our perspective, does represent an improvement over existing conditions. And just to reiterate some of those improvements, I mean, it does, you know, there'll be new fencing, there'll be a landscape perimeter, and there'll be a pretty generous pretty generous sitting area that's available to the public that doesn't exist now. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. This panel is now excused. We will now call for testimony on this application for members of the public. Please note that all comments are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on this item? No. All right. Cool. Just making sure. Thank you. Hearing no comments, this item is closed. And this ULURP public hearing is also now closed. The Borough President will review these applications and submit his recommendations to the City Planning Commission, which will hold its hearings at a later date. As a reminder, members of the public may submit comments to Ask Reynoso at brooklynbp.nyc.gov for the Brooklyn Borough President's consideration until Friday, July 14th, 2023. This meeting is now adjourned.